I mean, during the Biden, Ray, Garland administration, the Justice Department paid a bunch of confidential human sources, a bunch of them. We know a bunch of them were at the Capitol on January 6th.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to America Wake. I'm Wilson. You just watched a pretty explosive exchange featuring Representative Jim Jordan. And I've got to say, this was one of those moments where the questions seemed a lot more powerful than the answers. Whether you agree with Jordan politically or not, it's hard to ignore what he was pressing for here. Transparency, accountability, and a straightforward answer to a very straightforward question. The issue wasn't whether something was technically legal. The issue was whether it was ethical. If an organization is publicly highlighting someone as a dangerous extremist while allegedly paying that same individual behind the scenes, shouldn't donors know that? That's the core question Jim Jordan kept asking, and in my opinion, he never really got a direct answer. As we go through this clip, I'm going to break down what stood out to me, why these questions matter beyond politics, and why this hearing may have revealed a much bigger problem involving influence, credibility, and public trust. Before we dive in, make sure you like this video, subscribe to America Wake, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's get into it.
Mr. O'Neill, they had an extremist file webpage, didn't they?
Yes.
And they would, on this webpage, they would pick out some crazy hate guy, and they would, some bad guy, and he was like the extremist of the month. They'd highlight him, and they would say, send us money to stop so-and-so. Is that right?
Exactly.
And F42 was one of the field sources, number 42, chair of some crazy hate group. The Southern Poverty Law Center highlighted him on their webpage. He's bad, he's evil, send us money. Is that right?
Yes.
Did they tell their prospective donors they were paying this guy?
No.
They didn't tell him. Did they tell him they were paying him $140,000?
No, not to my knowledge.
So they said, let's stop the racists even though we're paying him to be racist. That was their pitch. But they didn't tell him that, did they?
No, they did not.
Is that appropriate, Ms. Wiley?
I'm sorry, which part? Sorry.
All of that. Is that appropriate to say, tell your donors, this is the extremist of the month, this hateful racist guy is really bad, send us money, but not tell those donors who you're taking their money from that we're paying this guy $140,000. Is that appropriate?
Well, we have public reporting that over a dozen donors actually said that they spent the money
Field Source 42 got $140,000 from the Southern Poverty Law Center, was featured on their webpage as extremist of the year or month or whatever they call these bad guys, and they were paying him and they were gating money. Is that appropriate? Simple question.
And donors have supported it, and they keep trying to send more money to the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Is that technique appropriate? That's what I'm asking.
That is not unlawful to say that people have done.
I didn't ask if it was lawful or
Z.
unlawful. As you said earlier in your testimony, the court's going to determine that when they go to trial. What I'm asking you, is it appropriate?
As I said, the donors have spoken. And in fact, they're trying to send more money now, and their financial institutions refusing to send the money.
Is the Alliance Defending Freedom, is that a hate group?
I don't know. I don't do designations.
Well, they've argued 16 cases before the Supreme Court, won 16 cases before the Supreme Court. They stand for traditional values. Southern Poverty Law Center labeled them a hate group. Are they a hate group?
I don't know them, and I don't work on the designations.
Well, here's one thing.
I'm here to talk about
let me ask you this. Is Jane's Revenge, is that a hate group? Because the ADF, they didn't firebomb anybody, but Jane's Revenge did. ADF is labeled a hate group. Jane's Revenge isn't. I want to know how you would label.
I'm not here as a person who designates groups. I'm here to talk about the impact on civil rights.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill, you think any of these field sources were double dipping? I mean, during the Biden, Ray, Garland administration, the Justice Department paid a bunch of confidential human sources, a bunch of them. We know a bunch of them were at the Capitol on January 6th. 4 went in the Capitol. And I'm just wondering if the same entity, the Justice Department under President Biden, paying these confidential human sources, who was working with the Southern Poverty Law Center, having quarterly meetings with them, consulting with them, giving them FBI data before anyone else could see it, having them train their prosecutors. I'm just wondering, do you think it was out of the realm of possibility that the Justice Department was paying the same sources the SPLC was paying?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I have no information or knowledge that they were double dipping. I would say that Stephen J. Ross, who is author of The Secret War Against Hate, which is about the history of informants that Jewish groups had placed in some of these violent groups back, decades and decades before the SPLC ever existed. He said that neither the ADL nor the American Jewish Committee nor the Anti-Nazi League did anything like highlighting informants online as in extremist profiles while also funding them.
Yeah. Last question will come to you, Mr. Perkins. In your opening statement, you talked about how it was just worse than the SPLC because how they've put themselves out there or become the standard of help from the government, I think, in becoming the source or the standard on evaluating and determining what groups are hate groups, what groups aren't. But it's bigger and broader. It has things. But I think the real thing here is how closely they worked with the government to carry out what they were trying to do. And the reason the Biden administration embraced them, I think, so fully was politics, simple politics. You agree?
Well, there are members of this committee that were endorsed by SPLC. They had a C4 was involved in elections, so they were not just an umpire; they were a player on the field as well. So how can they be objective in determining who is a purveyor of hate and who is not? I mean, they had a stake in this. But to your point about their engagement with government, it goes much further than the federal government and the FBI and the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense, which their material was in briefing to the members of the military. But they also continue to have their Learning for Justice, which is about 500,000 educators across America, and bulletins to local law enforcement. And I happen to know because the agency I was with, the sheriff called me and said, hey, we got a bulletin that says you're a part of a hate group.
Yep.
And he was laughing.
Yep.
But that is the reach that they've had. This is the hub. They're the hub, but they're spokes that go out and...
No, I think that's an appropriate metaphor. My time has expired with that.
Now that we've watched the entire exchange, I think Jim Jordan accomplished something that a lot of lawmakers struggled to do during hearings. He kept bringing the discussion back to the central issue every time it started drifting away. Notice what happened throughout this hearing. Jordan wasn't asking whether the Southern Poverty Law Center broke the law. He wasn't asking for a legal analysis. He wasn't even arguing about technical regulations. He was asking a much simpler question. Is it appropriate? That's it. And every time the conversation started moving toward legality, donor behavior, or organizational popularity, Jordan pulled it right back to the same point. If an organization publicly presents someone as an extremist threat and uses that person's image or activities to encourage donations, while also allegedly paying that same individual substantial amounts of money, shouldn't that relationship be disclosed to the people sending money? Whether you're conservative, liberal, or somewhere in the middle, that seems like a reasonable question. What stood out to me was how difficult it appeared for anyone to simply say yes or no. Another moment that caught my attention was Jordan's discussion about group designations. Jordan brought up Alliance Defending Freedom and questioned how some organizations receive the label of hate group, while other groups associated with actual acts of violence appear to receive less scrutiny. Again, regardless of where someone stands politically, consistency matters. If labels carry serious consequences, then the standards behind those labels should be transparent and applied equally. That's not a partisan principle. That's a fairness principle. The hearing also touched on something even bigger: influence. The testimony suggested that the Southern Poverty Law Center's materials have reached government agencies, law enforcement organizations, military training environments, and educational institutions. If that is true, then the question becomes much larger than one organization. The issue becomes whether any private organization should possess that level of influence while simultaneously participating in political advocacy and electoral activity. That's where Jordan's concerns seem to be headed. Because if an organization is acting as both a political player and a referee, people are naturally going to question whether its judgments are completely objective. One of the most interesting parts of the hearing was the discussion about government relationships. Jordan raised questions about interactions involving federal agencies, confidential human sources, and information sharing. Importantly, nobody presented proof that informants were being paid by multiple entities at the same time. Even the witness acknowledged there was no direct evidence of that. But Jordan's point wasn't necessarily that it happened. His point appeared to be that these relationships deserve scrutiny, especially when organizations become deeply connected to government institutions while simultaneously influencing public narratives. And honestly, I think that's a fair subject for oversight. Congress is supposed to ask uncomfortable questions. Congress is supposed to examine powerful institutions. Congress is supposed to investigate relationships that could affect public trust. Whether those institutions are government agencies, corporations, nonprofits, or advocacy groups should not matter. At the end of the day, what I took away from this hearing is that Jim Jordan wasn't satisfied with broad explanations or indirect responses. He wanted a direct answer to a direct question. Were donors given the full picture? Were standards applied consistently? And should organizations that wield significant influence be held to a higher level of transparency? Those are legitimate questions. You don't have to agree with every conclusion Jordan reaches to recognize that the questions themselves deserve answers. And in my view, that's why this exchange resonated with so many people. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Did Jim Jordan expose a serious transparency problem, or do you think the concerns raised in this hearing are being overstated? I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to America Wake, and share this with someone who wants to stay informed about what's happening in Washington. I'm Wilson, and I'll see you in the next one.